Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The Council of Juvenile Correctional Administrators, CJCA, in partnership with the Center for Educational Excellence in Alternative Settings, CEEAS, is hosting two webinars offering practical advice on the guidance package released jointly by the U.S. Departments of Justice and Education back on December 8th of 2014. Today is, of course, the first of those two webinars, and today's focus is on the Department's 5 guiding principles for providing high-quality education in juvenile justice secure care settings. Today's webinar is hosted by us here at CJCA, but it's going to be moderated by CEEAS staff who have also invited practitioners from around the country to present with them today.
Thanks, everybody. We're really excited to offer this webinar with our friends at CJCA. As he said, we're going to be offering highlights from the field today. We will be doing another one of these webinars in 2 weeks. We do have a number of guests. I'm on the line. I'm here with Christy Sampson-Kelly, who will be co-moderating with me. Christy has a PhD from special education from the University of Maryland, spends most of her time providing direct support to principals and teachers in alternative settings. We also have Peter Leone joining us today, a professor from the University of Maryland School of Education, College of Education. We have Susan Burke, who's the director of Utah's Division of Juvenile Justice Services. We have Tim Lasante, who's the superintendent of District 79 in New York City. They provide educational programming inside of the schools at Rikers Island and other secure facilities in the city. We have Scott Smith, who's the director of education for the Missouri Division of Youth Services. And we have Roselle Bradley, principal of the Tonti High School, which is located in a secure facility inside of Okeechobee, Florida. Before we get started, I just want to emphasize that we are not going to be summarizing the guiding principles document. It's incredibly clear and has its own executive summary. Instead, we'll be highlighting examples of juvenile justice agencies and their education partners who are working day to day to make these principles come alive in their agencies, facilities, and schools. We will provide samples, contact information, and a really great resource page. Every document that is referred to today during the webinar is available electronically on a resource page. But I'm now going to turn this over to Christy Sampson-Kelly, who's going to get us started with the presentation around principle number 1.
Hello, everyone. We summarize this principle as creating enduring, positive climates that make learning possible, and see really 3 essential components of this to be authentic collaboration, meaningful, connected, and relevant educational experiences, and ensuring the right to learn for all students. We will first hear from Susan Burke on what the Utah Department of Juvenile Justice is doing along with its education partners, the local school districts, on this lever. Afterwards, I will also highlight good work coming out of Washington, D.C. and Indiana. Susan, please offer us some examples of how Utah is collaborating to improve school climate in your facilities.
Thank you, Christy. I want to emphasize 4 different points in the next few minutes, and we're hopefully going to be visualizing those on the screen here. The first point is we have a strong working relationship between our secure facility staff and our education staff. And we do this through a series of interagency agreements. In addition, our facility director, as part of his or her performance plan, is expected to work closely with the school and have regular meetings with the school. One example of that is every day we send information to the school so they know what their student had been doing the evening before in the residential unit. Another thing that we do is we create authentic opportunities for both education staff and facility staff to work together on projects that have an educational component. We recently completed a mural project through the Emmanuel project, and we had 2 exceptional murals produced in 2 different facilities. This happened during the school day. It became part of the education and art component. Students got up on ladders, they used tools, paints, they worked directly with Emmanuel Martinez, the artist who designed the murals, and teachers supported this particular effort along with our facility staff. The second way that we emphasize making school real is that we try and create opportunities that the students would have just in their home school environment. One example of this is we sponsor inter-site athletics. And so the different facilities are able to put together teams, and the teams play against each other. So there is travel between facilities. The students have to meet a school code of conduct just like they would have to meet a school code of conduct at their own school, their public school. And they also have to meet GPA requirements. And so some of the things that we have seen come out of this particular project is students are motivated to learn. They're motivated to be part of the team environment. And they learn some really important life lessons. They learn how to cooperate together. They learn how to deal with disappointment and frustration. And they learn how to celebrate victories when they occur. The third area is that we have opportunities for schools to communicate with families. And some of our schools publish monthly newsletters that students actually author. And those newsletters are posted online, or they're also sent home, or they're hand-delivered when parents come to visit. One of our schools has a Twitter account. Another one is using a blog. And so there's constant communication between what's happening in the school and what's going on in the community that parents can tap into. And then the fourth area is that we've increased visitation options for families. We know how important it is to have families engaged and involved in supporting their child's education. So we have really changed how we go about visitation. We make sure that visitation is available every day of the week. We have certain times for visitation, but if that doesn't fit into the family schedule, we arrange for a different visitation time. We've also expanded the definition of family. Before it used to be just mom and dad. We've included extended family. We've included close friends of the family if they are support and an important person in that young person's life. And we've also included the family dog and cat to come out for visitation. We really want to create an environment where the student feels supported and that they have a positive environment for learning.
Thank you, Susan. I'm now going to highlight two other examples. The first is Washington, D.C. The emphasis here is on creating meaningful, connected, and relevant educational experience for students. At the Maya Angelou Academy in Washington, D.C., in partnership with D.C.'s Department of the Youth Rehabilitation Services, the school has a strong emphasis on academic projects that are culturally relevant, interdisciplinary, and build a range of skills. These also rely on the adults working with students in order for them to succeed. The model of instruction is built around such themes as relationships, power, choice, justice, freedom, and dreams. One example is the annual speech contest, which occurs as part of the school-wide cross-curricular focus of power. Students study speeches and learn rhetorical devices, watch great speeches, and then write and perform their own speech. They practice in the school as well as their residential units and then compete in the school-wide contest held in the auditorium, with all of the students gathered there along with visitors and outside judges to present. This contest is truly something to behold. I've been privileged to be a judge for the last 2 years, and both times I left changed by the young men who each discovered something of great power, their voice. One of my favorite lines from last year's speeches is this one: there are and will always be 3 types of people in the street: people who make it happen, people who watch it happen, and people that don't know what's happening. Well, that leads me to my next example from the field, and there are definitely some folks in Indiana who are making it happen. The last aspect of the first principle I'd like to talk about is creating an environment where all students have the right to learn. And for this one, I'll mention some of the great work that the Indiana Department of Corrections Division of Youth Services made over the last 18 months that we were fortunate enough to be a part of, regarding the intentional evolution of the Behavioral Modification Unit to the current Making a Change Unit within Pendleton Juvenile Correctional Facility. Most notable was a change in philosophy and practice that resulted in the expectation being that all young people were to attend school regardless of their placement and separation. Progression through program levels on the MAC unit meant young people moved towards once again attending school with their peers in the main school. Doing this naturally reduced the numbers of students who needed to attend the school in classrooms on the MAC unit and facilitated the delivery of instruction to students attending school on that unit daily for 6 hours per day, just like their peers. Further, it meant that students were provided with relevant, aligned instruction, including necessary special education services per IEP plans, and that allowed them to keep pace with their studies. Young people who used to stay isolated in themselves most of the day are now attending school and other programs on a regular basis and regularly interacting with peers and staff. This model is one that's being used to reduce and ultimately bring necessary end to the use of isolation. At this point, we're going to hear from David, who will discuss Principle 2.
We are now on board with Principle number 2. It's not all about the money, but money sure does matter. So the guidance is pretty clear here. We need to have enough funding to support quality educational opportunities for all. Our belief is that statewide per-pupil funding formulas should always serve as the starting point as we think about providing the right type of educational resources to make these schools work. We're going to address how 3 states address this principle. I'm going to cover 2 of them. Then I'm going to turn it over to Scott Smith, who's going to talk about Missouri. So the first one we're going to talk about is the state of Oregon. And hold on to your seats, everybody. In Oregon, which is the case in about half of the states in the country, local school districts run the schools inside of the state secure agencies, not the state agency itself. But in Oregon, under state law, there is specific language in the state code that allocates funding to the State Office of Education to fund these schools. And that rate is equal to, yes, 2 times the statewide per pupil average. And why does that multiple exist? Well, if you go back to when they first put it in, it exists to ensure that the schools selected by the state offices of education, school districts, have the resources they need to meet the needs of the schools in the OJA facilities. Many other states have weighted school funding formulas that do provide multiples for students in alternative settings. And we believe that all states should attempt to derive formulas that use state per-pupil funding formulas and appropriate multiples to ensure proper educational funding. The next state we're going to talk about is Indiana. In Indiana, Indiana runs its own schools. So the Division of Youth Services within the Department of Corrections has its own education division. And as most of you know, this is the case in about half of the states in the country as well. Historically, IDOJC has not had any set formula to determine the appropriate amount of funding it needs in order to meet the needs of its students. Instead, they fund the educational program from agency operating funds on an annual basis. And that's always been difficult and tricky and means quality educational services depend year to year on agency operating budgets. But right now, under the leadership of Susan Lockwood, they are engaged in the process of calculating how much funding they should be getting if the state funded their schools using the per-pupil state funding formula with the appropriate weights, with the goal of developing at some point a legislative mandate that would ensure that their department has appropriate and equitable educational funding. And we strongly advocate that for state juvenile justice agencies that run their own educational program, that they go through a similar process and ultimately get a legislative mandate that their educational program is funded on par with and equitably with other schools in the state. We're now going to turn this over to Scott Smith, who's going to talk about a unique way that Missouri works with this.
Thanks, David. In Missouri, we're an accredited Missouri Public School District, and our education programs are mostly financially self-sufficient, mainly because we bill back local school districts for their local property tax on students who are referred by the juvenile courts to our system. This is a long-standing state statute that any state agency can bill back local schools. And if you think about it, it's only fair. Why should a local school district keep their local tax funding for education for a child when they've been referred to another entity for education? We also receive state appropriation for students based on hours attendance. We receive classroom trust funds, the gambling funds that are distributed at every school. We receive Proposition C funds, which is a tax for education in Missouri. We receive federal funds, Title I Special Ed, Carl Perkins. So we have a steady funding flow into our school district, which really helps our education program. Plus, it gives incentives to the local school district to keep their kids, not suspend them, because if they do and they get referred in the Missouri Division of Youth Services, they actually lose money, not only their local tax money, but their state money because they're on our rolls.
Scott, terrific. Thank you for summarizing that. Again, we want to emphasize equitable funding, funding that will meet the needs of all students, and funding that is on par and relative to other funding formulas for other students in the state. We're now going to move on to principle number 3. And we've summarized this one as getting the best teachers in front of the kids who need them the most. How do you get teachers who are fully committed to your students' success? Well, through robust recruiting strategies, ongoing commitment to train, evaluate, and hold teachers accountable, and by compensating them fairly. We're going to be highlighting 3 states or agencies that are tackling this long-standing difficult issue: the Indiana Department of Corrections, the Missouri Division of Youth Services, and New York's District 79. I will summarize what's going on in Indiana, and then Scott and Tim will talk about what they're doing in Missouri and New York. So in Indiana, on teacher recruiting, although they are local state, Susan has done a terrific job of reaching out to local universities and colleges and establishing strong relationships to the teacher pipeline. There's no reason why enthusiastic, well-trained teachers shouldn't be considering coming to work in our youth correctional settings. They can be terrific places to work with small student-teacher ratios and lots of autonomy. At the same time, Susan is reaching out nationwide using online tools and other resources to get the best teachers in the country to come work with her kids who she knows needs the best teachers. Secondly, training and evaluation. Although the state agency runs the schools, the teachers in Indiana's facilities are evaluated using the statewide teacher evaluation tool called RISE. We think this is critically important. Teachers need training and support. They also need clear evaluation standards. And for state juvenile justice agencies who are not part of local school districts, we must find ways to ensure that there are fair and systematic ways to train, evaluate, and hold teachers accountable. Second thing that they do in Indiana is they have school report cards. These report cards summarize key student performance indicators on behavior and academic targets. They are produced quarterly. And the superintendent of schools, Susan, meets with her principals who meet with teachers on a regular basis to alter and amend instruction so that students will continue to learn and to increase achievement. These school report cards have been essential in helping teachers and principals feel more empowered and more accountable to help all of the students in their facilities meet their academic and behavioral possibilities. Thirdly, compensation is tricky, and in Indiana, teacher pay is comparable but not exact with local school districts. We're now going to move on to hear from Scott.
In Missouri, I'm going to start backwards and start with the worst and maybe go to the best. In Missouri, our teachers are state-level employees. They're paid less than their district peers. They work in a year-round school and have state benefits. Missouri ranks 50th in state worker pay. So it's a constant issue with the state of Missouri, and what we try to do is we expand our recruiting across the entire state. We emphasize internal promotion of our youth specialists who work in the classroom behavior management into teaching credentials. We reimburse teachers 100% for pursuing their special ed certification. Right now, 100% of our teachers are Missouri certificate at-risk instructors, and 60% have their special ed certification. We have professional learning communities in each of our regions. Our teachers are evaluated in our state merit employee evaluation system, but it's very flexible. We're able to add an educational evaluation supplement to it. The people who evaluate our teachers are not educators. They are juvenile justice and social work people who work within the facility as facility managers, but we have regional education consultants that provide and implement the educational performance objectives in their evaluation and provide consultation to the teachers and to each facility. We are an accredited school district. We have 46 through 12 high schools. And within those high schools are 1 to 4 groups of 10 to 13 kids. So our class size is very small, which can be an incentive for teachers to stay in our system. So in our particular scenario, retention is very important, and recruitment we're constantly working on.
Thank you, Scott. Let's hear from Tim Lasante, who is the superintendent of District 79. District 79 runs the schools inside of the secure facilities in New York City, including the schools on Rikers Island. Tim, are you there? Have you been disconnected?
Hi, thank you, David. As you said, we're part of the New York City public school system, and we have two schools. One is called Passages Academy, serving students that are 15 and younger in secure detention. And then on Rikers Island, students that are 16 to 21 are in a school called East River Academy. And there's advantages of being part of a large school system, and one is that we have access to the Office of Recruitment that constantly goes out to the universities and tries to get new teachers to come into the system. And we're continuously recruiting for these two schools. And the second big advantage we have is something called open market. Our principals can post in April their anticipated vacancies in these two schools for September, and tenured teachers can transfer in. And we really go after tenured teachers because we feel that in order to modify and adapt a curriculum in a short-term setting like detention, it's always good if you have some expertise in teaching that curriculum and experience. So our teachers have the same requirements as far as licensing as any high school teacher. The challenge that we have, especially in Passages, is that 54% of the students have disabilities and 25% are middle school students, meaning there's a different license to teach middle school versus high school. So the other thing that we always look for are dual certified teachers. A special ed math combination is like gold, very hard to find. So a couple of years ago, 2013, New York City accepted Race to the Top money, and we have now a new teacher and principal evaluation system for the last 2 years. And we're very thankful that our teachers were not exempt from this, even though the union wanted the teachers in secure detention to be exempt. And so we're in the same rating system, evaluation system as any other teacher. And the design right now is that teachers pick and they get between a minimum of 4 to 6 written feedback on observations. Those observations are based in the Danielson framework. The union and the Board of Ed focused on 8 different domains of Danielson. So within these observations, principals must rate each teacher on each domain throughout the school year. It gets weighted, and that becomes 60% of the teacher's final evaluation. 40% is based on state assessments. This week we're giving what's known as Regents exams because this is the end of the semester. We give them again in June. And what happens is they look at the school's performance on the Regents, students' performance on the Regents for the last 2 years. And if you fall within that range, you get 40% or 30% of your grade, depending on how well the students do. So 40% is based on state assessments, and 60% are based on the teacher evaluation. And unfortunately, our teachers don't make any additional money. The only thing that we can offer them, and this is something that Peter Leone helped us with a long time ago, is we got loan forgiveness for our teachers that have outstanding loans because it's a hard-to-staff school. So we really think this, what they call the advanced system of teacher evaluation, really has helped improve the quality of delivery of services in secure detention.
Thanks, Tim. Again, to summarize this point, recruiting is critical. Finding ways to make sure that your teachers are trained, supported, and evaluated and held accountable is absolutely essential, regardless of how you're structured. If you are a state agency that hires your own teachers, we would strongly encourage you to look at the statewide teacher evaluation tools as examples to how to find ways to support, train, and hold teachers accountable. If you are a school district that runs the schools for a state agency, we would absolutely urge the school districts to hold teachers in these facilities to the exact same standards that you would hold teachers to in the community in suburban school districts. And if you are a state agency where school districts provide the educational coverage, it is essential that you lean on your school district partners and make sure that you understand their teacher evaluation process. And if you feel as though teachers are not being held to high standards, that as the head of the youth correctional agency, you take responsibility for reaching out to the district leadership to have candid, transparent conversations about the quality of educational programming school districts are providing. I'll turn it over to Christy.
Thanks, David. We're now going to move on to principle number 4. And we summarize this principle as rethinking student-centered instruction. We'll highlight 2 examples for this principle. Peter Leone will first discuss the work done at Challenger Youth Camp in Los Angeles, and Roselle Bradley will highlight the work at her school in Okeechobee, Florida. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
Okay, thank you, Christy. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that's being done at Challenger Memorial Youth Center, where the Krista McAuliffe High School, which is operated by the Los Angeles County Office of Education, provides services to the youth. Over the last couple of years, Superintendent Delgado from LACO has developed with his staff, Diana Velasquez and others, something called the Road to Success Academy. It has a strong emphasis on project-based learning. Academic work is centered around themes that include identity, perseverance, and transformation. The schools also have a strong emphasis on literacy and have developed some terrific career and technical education options and vocational opportunities. At Challenger, over the last couple of years, I've seen some tremendous changes that affect school culture and that have really engaged students in very novel kind of ways. So what I'd like to do is highlight one particular project that I had the chance to see last month. This is a mural created by students in the building construction class along with the language arts class. They decided to create a 1960s style art piece with an overarching theme of identity. The students studied the artists from the 60s and settled on Andy Warhol and Jonathan Borofsky, 2 well-known artists that used both repetition and bright colors, and Borofsky in particular used silhouettes. So the students had to design the piece. They had with hand and power tools. They did that after completing an OSHA 10 construction industry safety training. They did research on the artists in developing this. They had to sand, paint, place the images on the board, and as you can see, it's a really terrific, I think, representation. You can kind of, if you go left from right, you can see the ways in which the students have envisioned their transformation as from incarcerated individuals to individuals who are kind of pondering their future, perhaps as students to graduates, and then to members of the community. Again, it just kind of jumps out at you when you see it. And the school has plans to create a frame and mount it on plexiglass. And it's a couple of creative teachers, Judy Warner and Amy Nobles at Challenger, that are largely responsible for nurturing the students in the development of this.
Thank you, Peter. And now we're going to hear from Roselle Bradley regarding project-based learning in her school in Okeechobee, Florida.
Thank you, Christy, and hello, everybody. My school is one of 4 schools within secure facilities in Okeechobee, Florida that form the Okeechobee Network. Basically, this became a working group composed of school leadership and teachers working together along to increase student engagement, promote critical thinking and rigorous learning, and to help move away from classes revolving around direct instruction handouts, and worksheets. So we collectively agreed to develop a one-week project-based learning module around the theme of how can I impact my community. All of the subject area teachers at all the sites used that theme to support a week-long exploration culminating in student presentations. So I'm just going to touch on some of the scholar perspectives, the teacher perspective, and the secure staff perspective. CEEAS provided each site with a video presentation to introduce the students to PBL and what it stands for, and the majority of students were excited to take on a new challenge. We did have a few students who refused to initially participate because they wanted to do the bookwork, but these students later changed their minds when they saw that the participating students were having a good time working on their selected projects. The students later reported that the best part for them of the PBL was when they were able to share their projects with the Director of Education for DJJ, Ms. Julie Orange, the CEEAS representative, Dr. Lynette Tannis, and the Deputy Superintendent for G4S Schools, Dr. John Zuli. The students did an impressive job of presenting their projects and answering questions. The students did report that at times it felt overwhelming to them since they had to do a project in all 5 of their subjects. So the solution to that, we determined, would be to do a PBL in only one subject at a time. The teacher perspective, it was met with some resistance from some teachers, and the reasons that I found for the resistance was that the teachers were under the impression that it will increase their workload in regards to planning and developing lesson plans. At the end of the day, after consultation with CEEAS, this was not the case. It actually made their task easier, and once the lesson planning was completed, it was all on the students. The teachers also felt that they have already incorporated PBL in their lessons, but this did not go all the way to a PBL since the students weren't able to select how they would present their projects and show mastery of the concepts that the teachers were teaching them. The solutions to some of the resistance, we had meetings with the teachers to review the PBL concepts and the training provided by CEEAS. We also had discussions of using the lesson plans provided by CEEAS, which made it a lot easier since it outlined the standards, the objectives, accommodations, rubric, hook, lesson, and closing. So all the teachers had to do was input the information that they would have put on their original lesson plans. Every one of the teachers and lead educators at the sites registered on Edmodo, where we received the support from 3 other DJJ sites in our area, CEEAS and Ms. Julie Orange. We also conducted a video chat session with a CEEAS representative who addressed all of the complaints and concerns and clarified any misunderstandings that we had about the PBL project. We also stayed in touch through emails and telephone and with our counterparts in the district. The lead teachers also participated in conference calls with CEEAS representatives. The secure staff, they loved it. They felt that they were more involved in the classroom. They were able to move around more freely. They were able to assist the students with giving feedback on their projects, assisting them when they needed supplies. So they really, really enjoyed the project, and we did not have any behavior problems during the week of the PBL. So that really kept the students engaged and focused on the task at hand. So we've met, since it was such a success, I've met with the facility administrator where we reviewed the survey results conducted by CEEAS, and the students were actually asking for more projects. So we decided that each month, starting this January, that we will have a week of PBL with a central theme, which makes it a little easier for the students to stay focused and they don't have to jump from one theme to another. For January, we have selected nutrition, and the teachers are addressing all aspects of nutrition from their respective subjects. Every class I've visited have students who can report on what they are learning and how they are shocked at what seems to be healthy foods are really not that healthy once you read the nutritional information. And in math, they are telling me that they are learning to calculate BMR. In science, they are learning about agriculture and pesticides. And in reading, they are comparing and contrasting nutritional information on products such as cereal. Vocational classes, they are learning about the training, education requirements, and salaries of the different careers, such as chef, marketing consultant, and the students are also using the lab time to use Publisher and Word to make flyers for their restaurants or a PowerPoint presentation of the different careers. With the culinary arts students, I'm baking cookies using some more healthy ingredients versus the more unhealthy ones such as brown sugar and regular sugar. And then they will end it with a comparison between the two and calculating the calories of the two groups. So I love the PBL, the students love it, and the secure staff love it because it keeps the students more engaged. They are excited about the learning process, and I believe that they are learning a whole lot more with a hands-on projects than they are with just direct instruction. So at the end of the day, I'm proud of the sense of accomplishment that it gives the students to show off what they are actually learning. Thank you, Christy.
Peter Roselle, thanks very much for giving us some great examples of how to make teaching and learning more relevant and student-centered. The last principle, principle number 5, we're calling breaking through the silos, making systems work for kids in transition. There are some pretty obvious keys here that are outlined. Reentry planning must begin upon arrival. Juvenile justice agencies, school districts, support teams, other state agencies, and importantly, families and the kids themselves must all be actively involved in the transition process. Wraparound support needs to be in place prior to kids being released to the community. We're going to highlight what 2 states are doing on this issue, Florida and New York City. I'm going to talk about Florida, and then we'll have Tim Lasante join us again for New York. In Florida's recent law, which again is attached on the resource page, statute 1003.5210, might just serve as a model that we all want to get through our legislature. Passed through at the state level, the law requires transition planning to start at the time youth enter the JJ's facility. It requires the development of an individualized transition plan. That plan must be developed collaboratively by a team that includes this juvenile justice agency representatives, people from the local school districts, people from the school district in the where the facility is located. It must include family members and other supports. It actually lays out and requires mandatory meetings that must be coordinated by the Department of Probation prior to school release. Importantly, it prohibits school districts from what has been a much too standard practice in Florida and elsewhere for automatically placing students in mandatory alternative schools. Instead, student placement must be done on an individualized basis. Again, that law is available in the resource page. It's only recently gone through the legislature, but I know the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice is really excited to see that it went through and is excited to start seeing how they can support its implementation at the local level. Tim Lasante is now going to talk to us a little bit about what they're doing on this principle in New York.
Thank you, Davey. Last year, 618 different schools sent students into our secure detention schools, 618 different schools from all over New York City. So one of the best things that we had gotten accomplished probably about 10 years ago is a chancellor's regulation stating that the students who are sent into detention have the automatic right to return to their home school. It's called home school reentry if they've been to that school within the last year. It's a 1-year time limit. Because before that, what happened was students would go into detention, sometimes it was just a few days until the next court date, but they were discharged from their home school and had to fight their way back in. So homeschool reentry is a policy that really helped us in the reentry of students. Our goal now is to make sure that all information is electronically transferred back to the home school and the school districts. How we do that in 2 different ways. One is all the transcripts, the credits that are earned at Passage Academy We have 6-week cycles where students can earn credits every 6 weeks. It goes right onto this student transcript, which is a New York City transcript. This way, when they go back to school, the homeschool can pull it up, and there's no haggling about, the coursework that was done in detention. So that was a big win, getting the credits right onto the transcript. And what we've done recently in the last 2 or 3 years is we invested in a platform called Plan to Succeed, which you see on the screen. Every student who comes into juvenile detention, day 1, when transitional planning starts, gets an account and a password, and they build their transitional plan. It's student-driven. And one of the first things we put on there is who's your primary support at home. Is it your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your brother? And we also put in the counselor and our counselor's phone number and email, and also probation officer if that's another person. And so all the contacts for the student's primary network are in this right away. This way, if the student gets discharged his next court date, he knows who to contact, or if his transition back home doesn't work. So I think those are some of the things. This particular platform we invested in, we got the whole boat. What happens in this is there's a career exploration piece. There's resume writing tutorials, so they can upload their resumes into this plan. And the key thing is they can be accessed as kids spiral through the system. We have a lot of movement. We have 8 different sites and passages. Students move a lot. If they get placed, they move to another spot. But because they have access to it through their password and their account, they can access this at any one of the sites or when they go home or in their home school. And the other thing I want to emphasize on these collaborations and reentry and our work is the partnership agreements that we've developed over the years. So before we embed teachers into these sites, any sites, we sit with the agency and we come up with a partnership agreement. We used to call it MOU, but then the lawyers got involved, so we stopped doing that. It's just basically we're going to make our best efforts to do this, and you're going to do this. Things like timely delivery of students to school. We're fighting that in some places. So we have, I gave some samples of the partnership agreements and also the Plan to Succeed, which is on the resource page at the end. And part of the partnership agreement is that there must be monthly meetings and they must be data driven. So we have a dashboard and we go over site by site, how many incidents took place, how many students earned credits that cycle, how many passed to regions and things like that. So one of the things we insist on are monthly meetings of all the supervisors, and the data dashboards are key because we want that to drive the discussions.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing that information with us. We're going to start to wrap up. So in closing, we want to summarize this by saying that really clear, well-articulated policies can set the foundation for strong, healthy, student-centered relationships to develop between teachers and secure care staff, between principals and facility administrators, between school district leadership and state agency directors, and between students and families and the people who are, for whom we are trusted to care for them while they are in secure settings. And it's both of these together that make this work. Really clear, articulated policies and agreements, and then thoughtful adults who work together on behalf of their students to make the memoranda and the policies come to life on behalf of the children they serve. And that's what we've tried to focus on here, is both the people side of this and the policy side of this. Before we go to the resource page, one other critical component that we would like to emphasize, particularly for states that run their own education divisions, is that we can't just forever say this is how it's been done and we can't address it. If you run a state juvenile justice agency and your teachers are chronically undercompensated, then you will chronically have turnover, you will chronically have underperforming teachers, and your students will forever not get the educational services they need, deserve, and are entitled to. Fixing that is difficult. It may require going all the way up to the state legislature. It may require changing your state code so you can have a different employee class so that teachers can be paid comparably with their district peers. That's just an example. All through this process, both school districts and juvenile justice agencies have opportunities to take bold stands and change the way you work day to day on behalf of the children in your care. And the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice have done their part in laying that out, we believe, by sorting that in 5 clear principles. We're now going to quickly take a look at the resource page. I want to thank Susan Burke. I want to thank Roselle, Tim Lasante, Scott Smith, and Peter Leone for joining Christy and me. I think we'll have some time for calls, but Christy's going to show you how the resource page will work just for a moment.
Very quickly, we have also provided some webinar resources. If you click on each of the principles, you'll see that examples of what was presented today are there. So for this principle that we just heard about, the Florida statute is there. If you click on that icon, there's a link that leads you directly to that. And also, Tim Lasante in New York has been gracious enough to provide us with a password to go ahead and check out New York City's Plan to Succeed website. And that will all be made available to you.
So the resource page will be on the CJCA website as well as our website. To the extent we could, every document mentioned, every policy mentioned, every statute mentioned is available electronically through a live link. That concludes our presentation. I think we may have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has any, I think if you send them in through the chat, Brendan can help us on that.
Great. And thanks, David, and thanks to all our panelists here today. We got some great praise on some of the programs that you guys showed us here. So I'm very thankful for that, and us here at CJCA, thank you all for presenting. Just a reminder that if you're typing in your questions, and I do have a few that I'm going to try and get to before we wrap up, but if you're typing them in, make sure you type them in on the control panel for the webinar. And if you're trying to direct your question to any one of our panelists in particular, just make sure you specify so, and I can try and direct those questions accordingly. So while you guys are typing in those, I want to get to one of the questions that came in much earlier when we were talking about Principle 1. And it has to do with getting some buy-in around Principle 1. The principle was creating enduring positive climates that can make learning possible. So I was wondering, David, maybe if you could talk a little bit about getting buy-in from all the stakeholders and what the process was like there.
Again, if the question concerns getting buy-in from teachers, secure care staff, adults in the room, I think part of this is you have to take a leap of faith. Adults want kids to succeed. Adults working in secure care facilities are almost always there for the right reason. We need to give them the tools, and we need to give them steps to take so that the learning environment will be one that's positive and uplifting and engaging. And part of this is you just have to believe. If you give students some choice, if you give students some autonomy, if you directly reach out to the best of their creativity and create meaningful, engaging academic activities that empower and make it important that secure care and teaching staff work together with kids, it almost always goes better, but somehow you just got to get that ball rolling. That's the best I can tell you. In facilities all around the country, people tell us, you can't ever put 20 kids in a room together because they're just going to be mad brawls. We can't ever do a student assembly because they can't get along. All that we can tell you is from a lot of the states that we work in, people are trying those things. They're trying, if you can't put, okay, don't put 100 kids in the auditorium, but put 30 and run a poetry contest and set up good procedures in advance. And you'd be shocked how supportive the kids will be of each other's poems and how supportive secure care staff will be to see their kids up there expressing themselves, doing well. So part of it is you just got to believe. You got to put tools out there, know that it'll appeal to the better angels inside of all of us, and know that ultimately all kids want to be in a school that's safe and inspiring, and adults want to work in schools that are interesting and engaging.
Well, thank you. And I think while we've got our panelists on the line, I want to make sure I can get a question over to them. So I've got something here that I think I want to run by Tim, and maybe we can get Scott in here as well, because it came in while we were talking about Principle 3. And Tim, you were talking about continually recruiting, and got a couple questions about turnover. Do you feel like you've got a high rate of turnover? And if you do, where are they going to? Are they going to other districts? Can you talk a little bit about your turnover?
Yes, a couple of years ago we did a retention study, and it was very similar to the rest of the city, but the retention rate in the city is not that good. We have teachers leaving, and that's one of the UFT, the union's goals for this year is to increase the retention of teachers. The challenge that we have is that we hire a lot of new teachers, and they kind of get that foot in the door with us, and once they get tenure, which is 3 years, they kind of then now are free agents and can go into open market and leave. And a lot of times they leave, and not necessarily because the conditions are bad. It's just that logistically, especially Rikers Island, it's a nightmare to get in and out of. It takes you a half an hour to get to your classroom, once you get on the island sometimes. So our retention is about the same as it is in New York, which is low. It's not that different than anybody else, but we have a real challenge in trying to keep folks to be career educators in juvenile detention.
And how about Missouri, Scott? You guys have a high rate of turnover with your teachers, would you say?
Well, normally we would. Right now there's abundance of teachers in the state of Missouri, so getting a teaching job in the state is an issue, whether you're in youth services trying to get out and make more money, or you're out just graduating from school. But we try to tap into a group of educators sometimes that people forget about, and that's our retired teachers in the state of Missouri. In the state of Missouri, the public school retirement system is non-Social Security based, so many people will retire after 25 years at age 47. They still got a good number of years left that they could teach, and we try to recruit those through our state Retired Teachers Association, and many teachers even retire in Missouri when they're after 30 years, and they want to build up their Social Security in our state system, and we try to recruit that particular group of teachers too. So that's just an area that I think people forget about sometimes, that retired public school teachers can make very good juvenile detention teachers.
Well, thank you both, and it's about 3 o'clock on the dot here, which is our scheduled end time. So I just want to again thank all of our panelists, and of course the staff over at CEEAS for putting together this presentation. I want to remind you all that we will be making everything available. We'll do a follow-up email to everybody that attended here. Also, those who registered, we'll make sure that we send a follow-up email to you. Anything else that you have questions on, you can always reach out to CJCA and the CJCA website. Please visit CJCA and the CJCA blog for information, and also you can reach us on any of your favorite various social media networks. This, again, is the first of 2 webinars on the topic. So we'll also send out follow-up information on how to register for the next webinar, which is currently scheduled for February 12th at the same time, 2 o'clock Eastern, and I hope to see you all then. So on behalf of our panelists today, thank you again for attending, and have a great day and a great afternoon.